Hello students, continuing with the previous class, I will talk about unsupervised learning today. So just to reiterate, we were trying to select the best features to be able to design a model to perform the right set of tasks needed. And from the features we were trying to learn. So there were different types of learnings that I was talking about. I had discussed supervised learning and today I will discuss unsupervised learning. So what is unsupervised learning? Unsupervised learning is the training of a model using information that is neither classified nor labeled. So I do not have any classes or labels associated with the data that I have. I just have the data. And from the data, I just have to inference what kind of proximity are this data in to be able to form the number of groups specified. So for an example, if I have a class of students and I say make 2 groups, the students might just on the basis of gender classify themselves. So they have taken a parameter and attribute to be able to classify themselves. If I say okay, group into 3, then maybe according to the marks that they obtain, the CPI, they make group. So again they have taken an attribute to be able to classify their data. So the model is used to cluster the input data into classes on the basis of statistical properties. I could have mean, median, mode, the simplest ones, or I could have more complex statistical properties such as texture, moments, etc. to be able to classify the data. So here again we have a training data. Like before, we split the data that we have into a training set and a testing set. And the training set we use to be able to get a machine learning algorithm which is based on unsupervised learning. So we'll discuss those algorithms as we move further. Ultimately we have a classifier in hand, and this classifier, whenever some new data comes in, it is fed into this classifier and I am able to predict which class does this belong to based on the unsupervised learning. So I could have parameters such as color. So for the simplest model, if I have colors which are kind of a differentiating factor, I have a fruit plate and I have different fruits of different colors. A color would be a parameter to be able to differentiate between these fruits. Now a typical land use, or this is a land use map of Kanpur. Different colors are associated with different kind of land uses. Now how does this happen? So suppose I want to do a land use estimation, then I could use the spectral features. So what is happening is that I have satellite images which are capturing information in different spectral bands, and from those bands I am able to get the spectral signatures of all the materials, all the vegetation. Green vegetation looks like something like this, soil looks like this, water looks like this, and I could have n number of classes and I could have spectral signatures of all those classes, and based on the grouping of that spectral signature I could classify the pixels from the satellite image in a land use map. So this is the same example that I was telling you of set of fruits, and I am able to differentiate based on the color. Now in unsupervised learning, like I have said, we are dealing with unlabeled data and there are various algorithms here. So you have clustering, which is the simplest of all. It is the unsupervised learning problem that involves finding groups in data. So I need to know how many clusters I need to form beforehand, and accordingly I make clusters. If the number of clusters is not specified, then I can also find out an optimum number of clusters using an elbow method, which I will talk about in detail when I move on to the clustering algorithm specifically. Then we have density estimation, which I will cover. Then we have visualization, which involves creating plots of data to be able to group them. So I could have histograms constructed and I could then find out which histogram is breaking where to be able to distinguish between 2 objects in one image. And then I could have projection. So let's discuss all of them one by one. So what is clustering? Clustering simply means grouping of objects based on the information found in the data, describing the objects or their relationships. So the group is to keep intra-class separation minimum and inter-class separation maximum. So here you can see based on colors, there are different shades of blue here, there are different shades of green here. But what we try to do is try to minimize this difference between the classes. Intra-class difference is minimized and inter-class difference is maximized. It deals with finding a structure in a collection of unlabeled data. So we are somehow trying to find out groups in which they'll fit in maximum to be able to have maximum separation between the inter-classes and minimum between the class. Now here we have k-means clustering, fuzzy c-means clustering and hierarchical clustering. We will see the details of all of these as we move on further in the course. So the goal here is to partition the data. Some examples are when I am finding groups of customers with similar behavior. Classification of animals given their features. So with a beak, you say that these are birds. Then reptiles, mammals, birds, fishes. So they could be classified based on the features of the animals. So the simplest is k-means, where I know the number of clusters I have to form. We will talk about this in detail when I have a specific lecture on just clustering. But a brief idea is that I know the number of clusters to form. Suppose my k is 5. So I know I need to have 5 centroids. So I will maybe assume any 5 random points to be my initial cluster centroids. And then I will end up finding out the distance between each and every point from each and every cluster centroid. And automatically what happens is that after iterations, when the clusters don't change, what will happen is that each and every point will get assigned to the centroid of this particular cluster eventually, and I will have 5 clusters with minimum distance between them and maximum between the centroids. So I will have 5 such centroids. So finally the centroids would be the centers of all the points which are clustered together in. So the drawback here is that we assume the clusters to be spherical. So if I have data like this, what happens is that I try to cluster all these points together and I'll have a centroid somewhere here. And similarly for the blue points, I will have a center here, but I know that this classification is wrong. So that is why the disadvantage of k-means is that we have spherical clusters, but it is the simplest of all and it converges very fast. And it works mostly well for all the kind of problems that we have. Then there is another clustering algorithm called optics, which is based on the density of the points. So density based clustering, unlike the centroid based clustering, works by identifying the dense cluster points. So we start looking at the density of the points rather than looking at the spherical structure of the centroids. Basically you are able to find out clusters of arbitrary shape and densities here, and it also identifies outliers, which are the noise. So to be able to understand an outlier, you can take a simple example. Suppose I say find out the average income of an average household of India, and here you start adding people like Ambani, Adani, all those kind of people who are much higher in the income group. Then what happens is that we get a wrong picture and the entire data set will be kind of skewed, and we will have certain outliers which will not give me a central tendency value which is close to what it should be. It will be higher than what it is. And similarly, if I take income of very low level people which are kind of out of job, then it will start decreasing. It will show average household income to be lesser than what it is actually. So those things are outliers which do not fit into our data. So here you can see the black points are the outliers which are not kind of fitting into this data. So optics is used for such data sets. Now another place where unsupervised learning helps is dimensionality reduction. As more and more features are added, the data becomes very sparse and analysis suffers from a curse of dimensionality. What does it mean? Suppose I have thousands of attributes, so x1 to x999. So what happens is the model starts become very complex, and there may be a lot of data which is kind of missing for a lot of attributes. So the data is also very sparse and the analysis is very difficult. So we need to we need to reduce the number of dimensions that we have. As we move further into the course, we'll have a complete lecture based on this. So right now I'll just let you know that we reduce the dimension by 2 ways. We can select features from the existing features. So like in the previous example that I had told you about estimation of a flat price, I could ignore certain features which I feel are not relevant enough for my model. So that could be like excluding certain features. I could also combine 2-3 features together to be able to get a new feature. So that is known as PCA, that is Principal Component Analysis. What am I doing is I am combining certain features, maybe 10 features I combine in terms of feature 1 plus feature 2 plus thrice the feature 3. That depends on the kind of algorithm that I apply. It will automatically tell me what kind of a best combination is available for these 10 features. So PCA is kind of combining these features together to be able to get one feature, and it ultimately reduces the number of features which we are going to train for our model. So PCA guarantees finding the best linear transformation that reduces the number of dimensions with minimum loss of information. So if I have two features, PC1 and PC2, and they are orthogonal in nature, and you can see that PC1 has a lot of variation than PC2. So I could maybe ignore PC2 completely and just rely on PC1 for further investigation for my modeling. So here I am able to reduce the number of features and go with just PC1. So that's the whole idea of unsupervised learning. I will continue in the next class. Thank you.